Ohayo gozaimasu. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Rennyo Shonin Memorial Day service, the 8th abbot of the Hongwanji, who passed away 527 years ago. Please join me in 1 minute of silent meditation. Thank you. We will now have sutra chanting, Shoshinge, which is on page 20 in your red service book. Let's please gasho before we begin.
おせ
Thank you for your participation. We will now have an Ofumi reading by Reverend Okumura. He will be reading Rennyo Shonin's Wisdom in the Last Age. You can find the translation in your red book, page 107.
内口の内径四十の男女たらん共柄は心を一つにして阿弥陀仏と深く頼み参らせて、さらに世の方へ心を振らず一心一向に仏助けたまえと農産主情はたとえ在業は人獣なりとも必ず御陀如来は救いましますべし。これすなわち第18の念仏往生の誓願の心なり、格のごとく献上しての上には寝ても覚めても命のあらん限りは称名念仏すべきものなり。アナカシコアナカシコ。
Thank you, Reverend Okumura. We will now have a message by Reverend Steve.
Hello there, Ohayo gozaimasu. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much to those who braved the weather coming out. It was past couple days, and a week or so ago, it was really raining like something out of a biblical story of Noah's Ark or something like that. It was really rain and lots of wind, but it's very fortunate for us that we have a building that has a big, strong roof and strong walls. I think of the men and women who made sure that we have a temple here, a place that protects us from the wind and rain, and that this is something that dates back, of course, to Rennyo Shonin's time. Rennyo is known as being the abbot, the leader of the Hongwanji, who even before we were split up into Nishi Hongwanji and Higashi Hongwanji, he had built, basically built the Hongwanji from a very small temple, and lots of scattered groups of Nembutsu practitioners around the country into, many, many, many members and many temples. And so I want to talk a little bit about his legacy today. Of course, you know that Rennyo Shonin, we have his scroll up here. Although he himself, when it came to having objects of reverence, he said that, better than a statue would be a scroll, and better than a picture would be just the Namu Amida Butsu, the name of the Buddha. And so we remember him as the restorer of the Hongwanji, somebody who built it from a somewhat obscure teaching into something that stretched over, all over Japan. And at a time when communication was still done very slowly, he was able to communicate with all these small groups of Nembutsu practitioners scattered around Japan through letters and through sending these scrolls inscribed with Amida's name. So one of his innovations was communication. And we always talk about the importance of the internet, and before radio and television, all these different ways of sharing the teachings with other people. Well, Rennyo didn't have those back then. He had letters. And so Reverend Okamura just read one of his most revered letters for laymen and laywomen in our present age. And so if you turn to that page, we have on page 107, Rennyo Shonin writes, "Laymen and women lacking wisdom in the last age should realize that sentient beings who rely deeply and with singleness of mind on Amida Buddha and entrust themselves single-heartedly and steadfastly without ever turning their minds in any other direction to the Buddha are unfailingly guided by Amida Tathagata, even if their ignorance is deep and heavy. This is the essence of the 18th vow of birth in the Pure Land through the Nembutsu. Once faith has been decisively settled in this way, they should, sleeping or waking, repeat the Nembutsu, saying the name of the Buddha as long as they lived." And closes with saying, "respectfully." One of the reasons for this format is because these would be sent to these groups, to these groups of Nembutsu practitioners, and they would have someone read it out loud. And so it was intended that people should gather together, sometimes just in a home, a local home, and listen to the letter and then discuss it afterwards, a precursor to our modern discussion groups. And so he's talking about men and women living in the last age. This is Mappo era. It's the, Shinran Shonin. He did the calculations. He looked at, his dates, and he said, we are really living in this time when the Buddha's teachings are fading out in this world. The Buddha had said that, after I die, there's going to be this period where it's going to become harder and harder in order to find enlightenment. And that eventually even the teachings are going to start to fade away. And so Shinran, looking at the world he was growing up in, a world of famine and war, he saw, this really is the almost like what we would consider to be like the end times. This is a time when there's no way for us to find enlightenment, to find peace on our own. And so that's why Shinran had turned towards the Nembutsu teachings, this thing where, if we're not able to do anything, we have to rely on Amida. We have to rely on this power beyond the self to pull us past the ignorance that is deep and heavy in ourselves. No practice is really going to be able to free us of all these greed, anger, and ignorance that we have inside of us. There's The Buddha is so far away. In Buddha's original tales, you could listen to him speak, and like that, you could become enlightened. And in the years that followed, you could read the sutras, and you could say, oh, I'm enlightened. But as time went on and the Buddha's teaching spread, it started to be harder and harder to find those good teachers, to find that good teaching. And so by the time Buddhism reaches Japan, reaches Shinran, he says, well, now the way that we've been doing it, trying to become monks and to get rid of our attachments and things like that, it just doesn't work anymore. And so when Shinran finds this Nembutsu teaching of steadfastly and single-mindedly thinking about and to say the name of the Buddha, to say Namu Amida Butsu, to rely entirely on the Amida Buddha's, on the power beyond the self to pull us out of the muck and the mud of the everyday suffering we're in. That's a way that ordinary people could become, find this thing called Shinjin, to find this harmony with the Buddha's teachings, to find a single mind together with the Buddha. We can't become a Buddha, but we can synchronize with the Buddha's mind while we're alive. And so that is what Shinran was talking about, and that's what Rennyo tried to popularize throughout Japan. And so he made a lot of changes in the ways that the temples were run. At age 43, Rennyo became abbot and quickly removed the upper seating area of the temple's altar so that all seats were on a common level. He wanted no distinction between lay and clergy. A record by disciple Kuzenki later quotes Rennyo saying, "I cast away myself, take a seat at the common level and seat equally together. That is because Shinran Shonin said, within the four oceans, people of Shinjin are all brothers and sisters. I too want to live in accordance with these words. By sitting together, I hope we might clarify what is clear and more easily, what is not clear and more easily attain faith." He's talking about creating this sense of community. Japan at the time was intensely divided by social class. The position you were born in dictated your entire life. And in some ways, we're still living in that kind of world. Unless you hit it big on YouTube or TikTok or win the lottery, it's very difficult to change your life circumstances. And so back in the day, it would have been unheard of for somebody who is very wealthy to be listening to the Dharma, to study, to ask questions, to be reading the teachings together with somebody who's just a, farmer or somebody who's laboring. But in Shinran's time, he saw it with Honen. He saw that there were prostitutes that were studying alongside noble women. And it was something that must have been quite a shock for somebody growing up in the monastery. For Rennyo Shonin, he grew up, with a lot of difficulties. It was a very poor temple. There's these stories of Rennyo Shonin, the head minister of the Hongwanji, having to wash his own clothes. It said, "I've learned that Rennyo at one time lacked oil, was forced to accumulate the smallest bunches of kindling, and studied in semi-darkness, sometimes by the light of the moon. He would wash his feet in cold water and miss several meals in succession." Not just clothes, not having servants. Rennyo has stated that he himself had to wash out baby diapers and clothes. So he's somebody who understood the everyday experience of ordinary people. And I think Rennyo is a real model for all the ministers who came after him. Unlike Shinran, who was born and grew up in a monastery basically, and who became a family man later, Rennyo had grown up where Shinshu ministers were not priests and not lay, like Shinran's ideal. you kind of straddled the line, not a monk or a layman entirely. You know, when I first got to Japan to spend 2 years studying Japanese and to go into the Senshu Gakuin seminary, I really didn't know anything about Japan or about Buddhism. Just how to say hello, where's the bathroom, where's the library. Even Buddhism, I just knew a very little bit. But living in Japan, one of the things that first really woke me up was every year the Yoshizaki members. You know, Yoshizaki was an area where Rennyo had built the Hongwanji there and had become very popular. And even now, it's still a very big Jodo Shinshu population there. So every year they go down from Yoshizaki to Kyoto. They go to pick up Rennyo's scroll and bring it back to Yoshizaki, and then they bring it back. And they don't put it into a car, they don't put it into a train or a van or anything like that. They pull it by hand. And seeing these members 500 years after Rennyo has died, seeing them pulling these carts, you know, with these megaphones and wearing the pilgrims' hats, pulling the kind of like a cart that had Rennyo's scroll in it. The respect and the love that they still have for Rennyo Shonin after all these years, that is something that really made me want to learn more about Jodo Shinshu. It made me want to learn about Rennyo, where people so many generations removed from their ancestors listening and, you know, maybe even becoming Jodo Shinshu because of Rennyo, they still have him in such high regard. I knew that I needed to learn more about him. And so, you know, Rennyo was not just somebody who dusted off Shinran's teachings and then translated it more easily. He's not just the guy who set Shoshinge and the wasans as an everyday practice or the everyday chanting for ordinary members. He's not just the one who sent letters all over Japan, but he's somebody who had to navigate politics. He was at the time, I always talk about that the thing that Jodo Shinshu is most famous for outside of Buddhism is military history. While Rennyo was alive, there are all these peasant groups that were pretty fed up with taxation. You know, the cost of living crisis was pretty high in Japan at the time. The samurai leaders around Japan were kind of losing control, and local lords were charging extreme amounts of rent, you know, the rice that ordinary people had to pay. And so there were these groups of people who had come together because of Jodo Shinshu. They were coming from these co-groups that were gathering together, and you know, this multi-class, multi-parts of Japan society that were growing because of Jodo Shinshu. Well, some of them were also organizing, like, you know, we're not going to pay rent. They were going on rent strikes, and they're protesting against this unfair treatment by the local government. And in some areas, they were even able to overturn the local government, and you had like a people's governance of these different provinces, of these small parts of Japan. And so Rennyo had to navigate, you know, of course he wanted to support these groups around Japan, but he also didn't want to have the government forces coming down on the entirety of the Hongwanji. So if you listen to Rennyo's letters, he had to write a lot of like, hey, please get along with your neighbors. Don't slander the gods and other Buddhas. Rennyo is somebody who had to live in a very political world just like us, you know, to encourage the members to have respect and to, you know, not attack their neighbors. And one of the things that he stressed is that, you know, before we can teach other people, before we can share the Dharma with other people, we got to have a understanding for ourselves. We have to find this shinji, to find this deep entrusting of the power beyond the self, of the Nembutsu of Amida Buddha in our own lives before we start mouthing off to other people about how good we are compared to them. That you always have to look inward before we start looking outward. There's this wonderful thing that Rennyo said, that at Buddha Dharma meetings, holding back in silence means faith is surely missing. It is thought that some preconceived notion must be held before speaking out. This is like seeking answers from unlikely sources. If one is joyous, it will be expressed. Whatever is in the mind, it will be pronounced. If it is cold, say it. If it is hot, say it. In our Dharma discussion group, if there is no expression, that silence indicates faith within is lacking. Even with faith, we are not always prepared, but we are more consistent through mutual practice and frequent contact with one another. So he's saying, we should be having these discussions with one another. We should be talking about what's going on in the world. We should be talking about what things we're feeling and experiencing. And that's a sign of having this deep entrusting in the Buddha's teachings. That when we know that we're all on the path together, when we're all vibrating at the same frequency, people are not that rich person, that poor person, this person of this ethnicity or that ethnicity, this nationality, that nationality. When we're all resonating with the Buddhist, with the Nembutsu teachings, when we're listening to the Ofumi, when we're hearing Rennyo's voice all these years, all these hundreds of years down the line, and it's moving us, when we can find that emotional and spiritual connection to the teachings of the people who've come before us. There's no distinctions of this person's up here, that person's down there. We're all at the same level studying together. That's the thing that Rennyo was trying to do. And that's the reason why the Hongwanji have survived all these years, all these hundreds of years, is that it's adapted and it's based around this learning together with other people, of studying together, of asking questions, of listening deeply to the teachings through the people around us. Rennyo talks about the bad seed. Do you grasp the meaning of makitate? Rennyo asked Hokkyo. It is a seed that has been sown but never fully cultivated, he replied. Rennyo agreed and pointed out that it resembles the obstinate mental attitude which, if not corrected by others, remains a fallowed mind. There's no faith without cultivation. So what Rennyo is saying is, just like he says in the letter for this late age, is that we have to always be listening. We have to always realize that there's more that we can learn. If we think that we've learned it all, we've heard everything, we close our mind. We don't have anything more to learn. Why continue to go to temple? Why continue to read a book? It's a done deal. But that is, that's stagnation. That's how we close ourselves off from the rest of the world and wither away. That's what it is. Rennyo says, when you hear something, you should always feel the rarity of it, as if you are hearing it for the first time. This is the way someone of faith is supposed to be. No matter how many times you hear of this one thing, it should always sound as rare as if it is the first time. If we can break down the differences between us, if we can listen to every Dharma talk and every lecture as if it's the first time we're hearing the teachings, to go into it with a beginner's mind, I think that Rennyo would be very happy with the legacy he's left behind. So thank you very much for listening, everybody. Thank you for remembering Rennyo Shonin today. And you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Steve, on your talk of Rennyo Shonin's life, and what an interesting one he's led. A few announcements. Today at 11:30 is the Maneki Neko Japanese class led by Reverend Okada. On Tuesday the 24th at 3 p.m., ukulele band practice in person and Zoom. And at 5:30 is dinner and movie night in the conference room. Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, a movie from 1963. On the 28th, Saturday, 11 a.m., Shoshinge for Beginners study class in English, led by Ringban Inoue in the conference room and Zoom. On Sunday, the 29th, 10 a.m., Sunday service, in person and Facebook Live. In April 1st, Wednesday, 5:30 p.m., karaoke night at the Betsuin, in person and Zoom. The following day, the 2nd, Thursday, 5:30 p.m., Hawaii District Lecture Series, Part 1, on Zoom. On the 5th, Sunday at 10 a.m., HBC Buddha Day service at Honpa, Hongwanji, Hawaii Betsuin, Pali Highway. There will be no service here at the Betsuin. Let's now please rise for Gatha Ondok-san, which is on page 112. This concludes our service for today. Thank you all for coming. Hope to see you all next week.